Hi. Okay, so this is going to be a really quick show and tell on how to use the terminal and the Finder together, because they work together extremely well on a Mac. The terminal, which you can find located in utilities. If you go to utilities in your Finder, and you'll find that the terminal app is right there. If you double click on that, you'll get a terminal which just popped up off screen like that, and it looks a little bit like this. At uni you will get first of all a whole bunch of information here about the profile loading, which is a bunch of environment configurations that we do on campus. Okay, but the same things that I'll show you work at home on your Mac as they do at uni. You may not configure this environment. Okay, so the terminal is basically a text-based interface. It's old school, like 1950s, 1960s onward, early computing. You can type in there. I'm typing rubbish, and the computer would expect you to type commands in there. If I hit return on that, I send the command, and it says command that not found. A command usually has the syntax where the command has a name, so it might be command, and then a space indicates the next bit of instruction for that command. And another space might be another bit. So those are bits of information being passed into the command. Some commands need lots of information. So for example, the command ls is for listing. If we hit return, it lists the files where we are now. ls can take an argument. Most arguments are the extra pieces of information that say, well, I want to list in a particular way. So, and usually arguments are preceded by a minus letter. So minus L is for long. You can see that that information now is in a longer format. ls minus L has produced the same file information. Here are the files. Some much more information in a tabularized format about permissions here, the owner there, the group ownership, some information about the size, although we won't rely on that. That's especially for directories, that can be misleading. The date that it was created, and the name of the file. So ls just gives us that information. ls minus L will give us a longer listing. Okay. ls minus H doesn't give us much at all. If you want to look up all the options for a Linux command, I'd suggest you Google some basic Linux commands and see what they are. There are many, and they do lots and lots of things, but there is also a thing called a manual. So man is for the manual command, and I want to look up the manual for ls, and then it gives me all of the information and all of the arguments and options for the ls command, which is list directory contents. These are all the different arguments you can pass into the command, and if we hit the space bar, you can go down through explanations of what each one of those are. You can see the long format is mentioned there with the minus L option. So there's lots of explanations in that. So again, that was the manual command. And you can actually look up the manual of the manual. And it says man is format and display the online manual pages. Okay, now to get out of the output of the manual, usually just the Q button, the Q letter will work. So it's a little bit like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but for all of the commands that are available on your computer and in the terminal. Okay, there are other useful ones like move for moving, RM removes or deletes, And find is a very powerful one, but it also has quite a complex command syntax. So for example, and another one is pwd. So pwd means present working directory. You hit that and it shows you where in the file path hierarchy on the computer you are at the moment. So if we do ls and we change directory into something like movies and then do ls and then do pwd, present working directory now, you can see that we've gone down one level into movies. To go back, we use the change directory command, cd, and we want to go up one level. Now the parent directory is always referred to as ... Okay, so dot is a shorthand for the current directory. So I change directory to dot and see where I am. I'm still in the same spot. If I go change directory to ... and then do present working directory, you can see I've gone up one level. Okay, so those are some useful commands. Basic commands is change directories, cd, remove removes directories, ls lists directories, like that. And there are many others which you can Google and find. Using the shell is something that animators and technical directors in a studio will use a lot, because many of the systems, in fact many computing systems around the world, are based on Linux, including this Mac. So OS X is based on Linux, which is why we have a terminal and why this Mac computer has a suite of instructions that can be done through the terminal. Okay, I'll show you one more. It's a little bit more complicated. I'm going to show you the find command. Now find is almost an art form in its own using this. So I'm going to do find. I'm going to start looking from the current working directory. That's where the dot becomes useful. I'm going to look for anything, and I'm searching things by name. I'm searching for anything. Anything is the wildcard. That is a dot. And mov. Anything.mov. And I want to print the result. So it's looking through from the current location, and it's looking all the way down through the hierarchy that it can find from there to find anything that is a mov ending in .mov, so a mov file. And it's finding things in a cloud backup. And it's continuing to find. So I'll stop that. But you can do all sorts of things in here, where you can look for files that have a particular size, a particular date, are owned by someone, and many other things. You can look up the manual for the find command, and it has a lot of information about how to use it. Very, very powerful. Very much more powerful than the Finder, which is a nice segue back to OS X's Finder. Now, I was saying this is text-based. It takes text input and it gives you text output. Those things are called standard in and standard out in a Linux world. So we type in a command, it gives us back information. So here's a neat thing. These two things kind of talk to each other. If I go to my movies directory, and we saw that there was some, well, let's find some files. Pictures, here's a picture. Okay, so there's a picture. If I look at it, it's that picture. Okay, I want to know how big that file is, or I want to do something with that file. So I'm going to do ls -l, and I want the file. So instead of, I don't know where the file is, instead of typing the path to that file, what I can do is I can just drag it down into here, and what it does is it drags the full path to that file and drops it there. And then I can just hit return to complete the command. And now it gives me the long listing for that file. You can see what the permissions are, who owns it, and the file size in bytes. Okay, so we saw how to drag the full path from the Finder into the command string. So we had our ls minus l, or we can just do ls for not a long listing this time, and we can drag that file down into here, and we get the string, the full path to that file being built there. So that completes the command string. It hasn't executed the command string yet. You can see the flashing cursor there. When I hit return, now it does that command. So it's a way for building up the command string and using the finder to grab the text paths. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Let's say I go to my home directory, change directory to my home directory with no arguments. Okay. Say I want to open the finder in that location. Actually, let's do this one. This is a particularly useful one. Let's go to /volumes, which is where on a Mac, and we list what's there. You'll see all of the external drives are listed there. This is where they get mounted on your computer. Now you can see we've got dab render there. Let's change directory into dab render. Okay, present working directory, pwd, we're in volumes dab render. Okay, but over here, you can see that we're in pictures, or we're in OneDrive UTS. So that's another neat thing. In the Finder, you know, if you do Apple T, you get tabs. Okay? So you can have multiple finders as tabs, in case you didn't know that. Okay. So over here, what if I wanted to open the Finder at dab render? Well, Apple has its own special command it's put into the shell called open. So we know that our present working directory is volumes dab render. If we type in open, but open what? If we do dot, that means this location. What happens? It opens the Finder at our location. So that's the other part of the communication that happens between the Finder and the shell. You can open any location in that you can type in the shell and find it in the Finder, and you can also drag any location back into the terminal as a string. That two-way communication between the Finder and the terminal are super powerful, super fast, and super handy. Okay, here we go for the third part of this. So using the Finder and the terminal together is going to be really, really handy for you people working in 3D that want to use the render farm. Because you have to now, the only way to submit work to the render farm is going to be through the terminal. Okay? So we're going to use the commands called farm submit. If I open the terminal, okay, so I've got a terminal. I happen to be in dab render here. If I just go change directory and go to just my home directory. So change directory with no arguments afterwards takes you always back to your home directory. Okay. If I open, what I want to do now is I want to use the terminal to open the Finder. Volumes dab render. Oh, spell open right. So the up and down arrow keys go back through the history of all the commands that you've got, that you have typed, which is another nice thing. In fact, you can type in history and you see all the commands that you've typed with a number. Okay, I just want to correct that spelling mistake because I spelled open with 2 O's. So I just go back, remove that so it's right, and then hit return. Okay, so now I've got my dab render. Let's get rid of that Finder and put this Finder here. Okay, I like navigating through the Finder is actually kind of fast. So I want to go into work. I'm going to go to somewhere where I've got something to render. So research work, which is where I've been just setting up some farm testing, and Maya, and I've got some scenes, and I'm going to look in my Maya file, my Maya scenes directory, and I've got some farm tests there. So this is my Maya project on Dab Render. And these are my scenes that I'm going to render. Okay, so I'll leave that open and I'll show you how to submit something to the farm. So we're going to use farm. If you type farm and then hit tab in the shell, it tries to complete that command with all the possible commands that it could be. If you hit tab twice, it shows you what all the possible commands could be. So the terminal here is quite intelligent. It's thinking ahead for you. It's like AI. So we're going to use farm submit this one here. Farm submit Arnold command. So if I give it the next letter S and then I hit tab, well, it knows that all of the things that could be there are the word submit up to the next bit of choice block. So now it knows it's farm submit and we're building the command. But we're going to give it Arnold. We type A and hit tab, and now we have the whole command there. All right, so this is the command that's going to send a job to the render farm. If you type in -h as an argument, which is help, actually, if you don't type anything in, what you'll get is you'll get an abbreviated help and a complaint that it hasn't got enough information. Okay, so it says critical, Shotgun Factory, can't load Shotgun API. Okay, that might be a problem. We might have to come back to that. Farm submit Arnold command, and these are all of the different arguments that you can send to give it. It wants to know what the project is, it wants to know what the scene is, start frame, the end frame, by frame, the number of chunks you want to render with, the number of threads on the computers, which version of Maya, and the resolution. Okay, so but this front one, -h, is help. So if we give it that, -h only, then you get a kind of a nicer explanation of the arguments. Okay, same information. Okay, let's put our fingers, cross our fingers together, and we're going to now use the finder. I'm using the up arrow key again. I don't want that -h there. This time I want to start giving it some of this information. So first thing, like all my things, I need to give it the project. So it wants the full path to the project. So this is where the finder becomes valuable. So that's my project right there. The Maya one. Of course, it has the workspace.mel folder in it. So that's what the project is. Okay, so rather than knowing the path here, I can just drag the path in. Okay, so that's my project path. Now I need to give it my scene. And again, I just go and grab one of these. I'm going to render this farm test 2, drag it in here, and it's dropped in that path. Now look, something you have to pay attention to has happened there. You can see there, between scene and the string to that scene file, there's no gap. I didn't type in a gap, a space, and there has to be one. Otherwise it thinks that's one great big long word. So we just go back and we make a space. Okay. So we've given it the project, the scene. Now we want this start, end, by, chunks, threads, and Maya. Okay, let's do that quickly. -start, frame 1. I'm leaving the spaces, can you see? -end, 12. -by, 1. -chunks. This is the number of chunks it'll make up in the initial tasks when it's converting the Maya file into Arnold renderable information for the frames. So I'm going to give it 4 there, or actually I'll give it 2 chunks. So it'll just divide it by 2. If you do it by one, then it makes one job first of all. It translates the whole scene, and that can take a little longer. If you do it more than you've got frames, well, that's obviously not going to work very well. Okay, minus t is the number of threads on a computer that we want to use, and by default we always use 8. In fact, the command says default is 4, but we will go with 8 here. And then minus Maya. What version of Maya do we want this thing to render with? 2022. And I'm not actually going to give it the res, because the default, if you don't give it anything, as it says in the help, is to use the value found in the Maya file. So whatever resolution you happen to have in your Maya file. So this whole thing is my command string that I've built up. And some of it, the long bits, I've used by dragging from the Finder, which is really easy. Okay, now if I hit return, it says that we've had success. This is all of the output. This is the job that it's constructed and sent to the farm, and this is the information telling you that it was job success. If we have a quick look on the render farm, bring this over, and we look at the jobs, we can see that we have a job that's just been submitted. It has chunk 1 and chunk 2 from our 2 chunks, and then our 12 frames being rendered. And it was submitted by me at this time. So that's kind of how it works. It's a first step. I'm sure you'll have all sorts of tricky problems doing that until you get used to it, but that's how I do it.